There's no shame in making travel a little easier. After a year-long journey through Latin America, fatigue began to settle in. Mexico, Colombia, Ecuador, Peru, Argentina, and now Brazil. Initially, I had a grand plan of spending 3 months traveling through this massive, diverse country. But after a year of being on the move, the idea was more exhausting than exciting. I decided to embrace a more gentle approach. I swapped the ambitious 3-month itinerary for 2.5 weeks in Sao Paulo. I'd focus on one city, which happened to be the largest city in the Americas, where the adventure would continue. Making something feasible doesn't diminish the experience. It simply allows you to do something on your own terms. I actually visited Brazil 10 years ago during Carnival. My friends and I did a 10-day road trip from Sao Paulo to Rio. We stopped in the beautiful beach towns of Ubatuba and Paraty, where I met warm, friendly people and got the worst sunburn of my entire life. Perhaps one day I'll return to Brazil a third time and fulfill my original plan. I booked a place in a neighborhood called Pinheiros, known for its restaurants, art scene, and nightlife. Most importantly, it was safe. My accommodation had an intriguing layout. The host lived in a separate house at the front of the property. Behind it was another building with a shared kitchen and laundry room. Upstairs were 2 small bedrooms with a shared bathroom, and there were 2 additional apartments off to the side. My room was small and simple, with a single bed, a closet, desk, chair, a small rug, and a high-powered fan, which turned out to be crucial in the upcoming days because I arrived in the middle of a heat wave. Everything was painted white, which made the room feel light and airy, despite its small size. The flight from Buenos Aires took roughly 3 hours. I arrived at my accommodation at 9 in the evening, and the first thing I did was laundry. In the middle of hanging my clothes on the drying rack, I turned my head, and a man appeared out of the shadows. He was just one of the other guests, but I couldn't help but scream. He didn't speak much English, and I spoke even less Portuguese, but I understood he taught film online and was vegan. Another guest was a Brazilian woman from Porto Alegre, who came to Sao Paulo for the trial period of a potential job. Her name was Vanessa. She was 30 years old and specialized in motion graphics. She had wavy, chocolate brown hair and porcelain white skin. She kept her face wash in the shared bathroom. I noticed it was for acne-prone skin. Vanessa lived in New Zealand for the past year on the country's working holiday visa. The rules were you could only work the same job for a maximum of 3 months. So she had a different job for each season. She separated lily bulbs, picked mushrooms on a farm, and worked as a cook in 2 different restaurants. Her favorite was mushroom picking. Work was done in a dark greenhouse, which she thought was cool. She could chat with other workers or listen to music through her headphones. It was a peaceful environment and a meditative job. One evening, she went out to dinner with her coworkers from the farm and was shocked to see the owner of the farm eating at the restaurant as well. She said in Brazil, you would never find both owner and worker eating in the same restaurant. The pay gap was too great. The worker could never afford it. Vanessa said there were too many people in Brazil, especially in Sao Paulo. Someone always needed a job. There was no need to pay workers more when there was always a person willing to work for less. It was much easier for her parents' generation. At her age, they owned a house, a car, acres of land, and could afford to support children. Vanessa could afford rent, food, and 1 night out a week. Buying a house or starting a family was unfathomable. She didn't like Sao Paulo at all. It was too big, and she didn't feel safe. She'd be returning to her hometown in a few days because the trial period of her job was over, and the company did not hire her. But she seemed positive. I wondered what was next for her. since she had no other plans aside from going home. The next day, I reunited with a familiar face. I met Isabella a few months ago while scuba diving in the Galapagos Islands. She was born and raised in Sao Paulo and invited me to contact her once I made my way to Brazil. The presence of a familiar face offers an undeniable comfort while traveling alone long-term. When we first met, her hair was a cheerful pixie cut. Now, a few months later, it was a flirty layered bob. We went to a Brazilian restaurant in the neighborhood that had a buffet every Sunday for about $15. Isabella brought her 2 dogs. Both were strays she adopted. She was less than 5 feet tall, and the medium-sized dogs looked enormous walking next to her. Since this was a buffet, I went to town. I tried feijoada, Brazil's national dish. It was a black bean stew with pork and sometimes beef, served with rice and shredded kale. I loved moqueca, a traditional dish from the state of Bahia. It was a fragrant fish stew made with plantains, palm oil, coconut milk, and spices. Isabella had vatapa, which was a creamy dish made of shrimp, nuts, palm oil, and spices. She didn't like chicken, didn't eat pork, and rarely ate beef. However, she made the exception for high-quality sausages, which I found funny, since I usually steer clear of sausages because of their mysterious nature. We had tapioca for dessert, which Isabella said was actually a breakfast dish. I'm the most familiar with tapioca pearls in milk tea and other colorful Asian desserts, but it actually originated in South America before being introduced to Asia through trade routes. Isabella's parents both worked in finance and suggested she and her sister also pursue careers in Brazil's lucrative finance industry. Instead, she chose to be a public servant and a professor, while her sister chose to be a diving instructor and yoga teacher. Their parents bought them a 2-bedroom apartment during their university years. Her sister left Sao Paulo permanently and now lived on an island off the coast of Brazil. Isabella stayed to do her PhD and converted the spare bedroom into an office. After lunch, she invited me over to her home since it was only a 15-minute walk. It was in a high-rise in a quiet residential neighborhood. She decorated the apartment with furniture passed down from her grandmother and what seemed to me like hundreds of books, both academic and fiction. Her bathroom shelves were laden with creams, lotions, and beauty products. It clearly belonged to someone who lived there for 20 years. Isabella gave me a bottle of insect repellent, warning me there was a dengue fever outbreak in the city, and the hospitals were already at full capacity. She said Sao Paulo's current mayor was incompetent. He repaved the streets but didn't finish the job. The crosswalks were never painted, which led to several traffic accidents. She was currently working on a major project which concerned bringing a higher level of education to children all over Brazil. I admired her passion for her work and dedication to her country. Isabella loved mountains, rock climbing, swimming, camping, and hoped to hike the Pacific Crest Trail one day. Aside from Portuguese, she spoke fluent English and Spanish and was very well traveled. She enjoyed Japan, but was annoyed the machines wouldn't stop talking to her even while she used the bathroom. India was much easier than expected, although she already had friends there to receive her and show her around. She advised, in order to enjoy India, you needed patience. There are so many people, so things will naturally take longer. Duly noted. Isabella spent money freely, frequently adding to her belongings in a way I wasn't used to since I live out of a suitcase. If we popped into a bookstore, she'd buy a new novel. One night, we had dinner at a Palestinian restaurant. Someone was selling scarves, and she purchased one. A child was selling candy, and she bought the entire bag. She was 40 years old, a tenured professor, and didn't need to pay rent, so she had plenty of disposable income. Even though I'm very fortunate to have the life I have, I couldn't help but envy her for these two pillars of stability. One afternoon, we went to a samba bar where she introduced me to her friends. One of them was her new lover named Gustavo, who she met during Carnival. She said the usual protocol was we dance, we kiss, and we part ways. Unexpectedly, he asked her out on a date after they kissed. At the bar, Gustavo seemed relaxed and happy as he danced to the music. I was shocked when Isabella whispered, "His father died yesterday, and his mother died the week before." Both parents had been sick for years, and he took care of them. He was only 40 years old, with a handsome, rugged face, but his hair was completely gray. I wondered if it was because of stress or genetics. He asked how long I was staying in Brazil. I replied, about 2 weeks. He chuckled and said, "It takes 5 years just to know the north of Sao Paulo." I normally don't like loud music, but I love a live samba band. The louder the better. I want to feel the marrow vibrating inside my bones. Perhaps the drums stir up something primal. Portuguese is the most beautiful sounding language I've ever heard. I wonder if my future travels around the world will crown a new champion. I gazed around the bar and said to Isabella how I love the diversity of Sao Paulo. She looked confused and replied, "Yes, Sao Paulo is diverse, but everyone at the bar was white." I took another look and said I couldn't tell who was white and who wasn't. Some were tan, some were pale, some were blonde, and some were brunette. Isabella asked me if she looked white. I peered into her face and said, yes, she did. I gestured to one of the waitresses who had olive skin and curly brown hair and asked Isabella if the waitress was white. She replied, no. It wasn't a massive leap from Isabella's appearance to the waitress's, and yet one was and one was not. Back in Medellin, I had a Brazilian housemate named Guilherme. People often mistook him for Italian or Middle Eastern. He said, there is so much intermingling in his country's history. No one cares about race anymore because it's impossible to distinguish. Brazil imported more African slaves than the United States. Slavery fueled the labor demands of the country's sugar plantations, gold mines, and other economic endeavors. It was abolished in 1888. Isabella clarified, even though there was no civil war like the United States, there was plenty of bloodshed on the road to ending slavery, and racial inequality was still alive and well in Brazil today. She invited me to a play one evening. I was hesitant at first because it was all in Portuguese, but she insisted I would understand the story through the actor's body language and use of props. She was right. I could understand the general story, which was about the struggles of the poor and homeless in Sao Paulo. It was a shame I couldn't catch the finer details of the script, which I'm sure were deeply moving. There was a live samba band during the intermission, and I took the opportunity to ask Isabella the specifics of the plotline. One character was pregnant and in an abusive relationship with her boyfriend who couldn't keep a job. He eventually beat her so severely and caused a miscarriage. Another character was ill, and I couldn't tell if she was selling or taking drugs. Isabella clarified the character had multiple sclerosis and was selling drugs to pay for treatment. Another character was once a successful fashion model who traveled the world but succumbed to drug addiction, which led to her life in poverty. I hadn't been to a live theater performance in ages. Back when I lived in New York City, I'd go nearly every week, from Broadway musicals to operas to ballets. I even had a routine before every performance. After work, I'd go to a Turkish restaurant near my office, order the set menu, enjoy my dinner, read for an hour and a half, and then walk to the theater. Perhaps I'll return to New York City someday and indulge in this ritual once again. Hopefully the Turkish restaurant is still in business. Even though plays are meant to be performed to a live audience, they're also wonderful to read. One of my favorites is A Streetcar Named Desire by Tennessee Williams. The story follows Blanche Dubois, a Southern belle who arrives in New Orleans and clashes with her brother-in-law, Stanley Kowalski. As her delusions crumble, she faces a tragic downfall. I had a normal life during my 2.5 weeks in Sao Paulo. I went to the market, exercised at the gym, I worked, I cooked, and sometimes I went out in the evening. Sao Paulo is a hilly city. A short walk to the gym was a warm-up before the workout. I got a class pass with a free 2-week trial, which worked out perfectly since I was only in Sao Paulo for 2.5 weeks. I went to Pilates, yoga, boxing, and body sculpting. The 3 sports bras I packed for this trip finally saw the inside of a gym after a year in my suitcase. One evening, it rained heavily after boxing class, and one of the students kindly offered to drive me home. What would have been a soaking 20-minute walk quickly turned into a comfortable 5-minute ride. Every morning, I would take my breakfast on the apartment patio, sometimes reading a book in the cool morning air, while the shade slowly but surely receded and the temperature rose. Once it became too hot, I'd return to my room and sit in front of the fan. Isabella said this level of heat wasn't normal, and Sao Paulo's buildings weren't designed for it. I did notice many cafes didn't have air conditioning, but I found a co-working space that did. Even though there were no flat whites on the menu, the barista kindly made one for me. I extended my stay at my accommodation but had to change rooms. I considered asking to move into the more expensive air-conditioned room to be more comfortable during the heat wave, but decided to remain stoic and bear the temporary discomfort for a few more days in efforts to keep my living costs low. Luckily, the temperature dropped to a comfortable level in the evening. The room across the hall was an exact mirror of my previous one. Whatever was on the left was now on the right, resulting in a stubbed toe on my first night, before quickly adjusting to the inverted surroundings. Isabella suggested a farmer's market, which I went to every week. On the 15-minute walk there, I'd always pass a traffic median where a small camp of homeless people lived. They had a line of laundry set up between 2 trees. The market was well organized in 2 neat rows. I bought papaya, mangoes, zucchini, tomato, garlic, and to my delight, Chinese cabbage. The vendors were gracious and polite. To my surprise, most accepted credit cards. I made the mistake of thinking I'd need a lot of cash in Sao Paulo. It turned out to be the opposite. Most establishments accepted credit cards and phone transfers. Some didn't even take cash. Isabella often went out with only her phone, not even needing a handbag or a wallet. One night, she took me to her favorite Japanese ramen place in Sao Paulo. The head chef recently returned from an inspirational trip to Japan and made numerous changes to the menu. She had the vegetarian ramen, and I had the miso ramen. The noodles were hand-cut, and I was surprised to find a square of butter on top. It was the best ramen I've had in Latin America, and to no surprise, since Brazil has the largest Japanese population outside of Japan. Sao Paulo was the only Latin American city where it felt like I seamlessly blended in. I saw several Asian people almost every day, in restaurants, at the gym, on the train. It was pleasant to walk around this bustling metropolis, completely unnoticed. Before my arrival in Brazil, I spent 2 months in Argentina. Find out how I adjusted to my new surroundings during my first week in Buenos Aires in this video, where I move in with a local psychologist, get acquainted with Argentine cuisine, and catch up with an old friend.